We're going to get started. My name is Javier Botana. I am an advocacy advisor for IntWork. IntWork, for those who may have not heard Stephanie. Wow, they're even louder than I am. If you haven't met Stephanie Treiskill, our founder, is a search firm based here in the Portland area that specializes in finding, helping, and placing foreign trained professionals, not exclusively, but that's a large part of our practice, and helping them to find positions that realize their full potential. So, allows them to bring the skills and the training that they've acquired over a lifetime that they may not be using currently in their, current employment, and helping them to find those types of positions here in Maine, in the U.S. The company's been around for about 5 years and has placed, dozens of individuals in those positions. I am a refugee. I came to the U.S. from Cuba. My family came when I was 3 years old. And, we had the good fortune of coming at a time when this country welcomed and valued what immigrants and foreign trained professionals brought, and we were able to. Is that like confusing? It's throwing me off. So yeah. So we were able to quickly get the support that we needed and found our way, into the mainstream of American society, something that I've been incredibly grateful for my entire life, and something that I've tried to, pay forward. And so that's a big part of my motivation to work with IntWork and to do the work that we are currently doing. Today, I have the pleasure of moderating this panel presentation. I think that you will gain a lot from what our three presenters bring today. They will be introducing themselves in a couple of minutes as they come up one by one, and they will share a little bit about their background. And, as diverse leaders in a state that is increasingly diverse, what we wanted to do is we wanted to capture the experiences of diverse leaders from different parts of the state than what you traditionally hear about, which is, Southern Maine. So I personally, was superintendent of the Portland Public Schools for 7 years. I did a lot of work to diversify the workforce at Portland Public Schools. Some of it relatively successful. We moved from 3% to 12% of our faculty and staff being diverse during my tenure. And it's something that I'm incredibly proud of, but it's also something that was happening in a setting, in a context that is, very welcoming of that work. I was fortunate to have a school board that believed that that's what we needed to do, and a community that was generally, not universally, but generally supportive of that work. But that's not always the case. And I think you will be hearing about the challenges that diverse leaders in diverse parts of the state have. And so that's how we've thought about this presentation. I think that's what you will have an opportunity to hear. How many of the folks in the audience are from Southern Maine? So a good group. How many are not from Southern Maine? So Central, so even more. So this is great. So you're going to see a little bit of the challenges that, folks face when they're doing DEI work in other areas of the state. So with that, the way that we're doing this is they're going to come up, they're going to introduce themselves, maybe 5 minutes each, and then we have a series of questions that I will pose, and they will take those questions in order, hopefully building on each other and to the extent that it's possible, or contrasting their experiences to the extent that that's the appropriate setting. And then we hope to open it up for those of you in the audience who may have any questions. So we're going to do that at the end. So that's how we're going to run it. And again, thank you all for being here. I do have some housekeeping notes that I want to read to you before we get started. And you'll hear these again at the 10:30 session and so on. So please visit the exhibitors in all 3 locations throughout the hotel. We will be giving lunch instructions. I'm not going to give those now. I'll do those at the end. Signage will be posted on the doors of the breakout rooms, and there will be a survey shared after the conference to have you let the organizers know what you think. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Ella Michaela Bowman, who is going to be our first panelist to introduce herself.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. How many managers do we have in here? How many human resource people do we have in here? How many DEI people do we have in here? I am Ella Bowman. I'm the town manager for the town of Winslow. I've got 25 years as a municipal public servant. I worked almost 10 years for the town of Oakland and 15 years prior to that as a police officer. I'm actually a retired police officer. 2021, at age 61, I came out as a transgender woman. I am most likely the only out transgender woman in the United States of America, let alone the state of Maine. We can't find that there's anybody else. 2007, Susan Stinson in Largo, Florida came out and she was terminated immediately on the second test. So we'll see how that goes for me. As managers and leaders who most likely are involved with employees, there's a chance that you actually have somebody working for you, or you yourself may be transgender, but you don't have the courage to raise your hand. When that person, or if that person decides to come out, the shock is so strong with employees, with you, that it's hard for you to understand what this is about. And the reason why it's hard for you to understand is because you don't have the capacity to understand what this is. You can hear the word hot, but until you feel what hot is, you don't know what it really is. To be transgender, to have your gender and to have your sex separated, you don't know what that feels like because chances are you have your sex and gender lined up. I've had people come up to me and say that sex and gender are the same thing. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not, and how can you tell me it is if you've never experienced it? If you've never experienced it, you can't tell me it isn't. If that employee comes out, chances are they have lived a very, very hard life dealing with gender dysphoria. At 61 years old, I finally had the courage to do this. My entire life, I struggled with gender dysphoria. Every waking moment, I knew that there was something wrong. At 3 and 4 years old, I was telling my parents that I was a girl. Back in 1963, that was not cool. And it's not cool today. So that person, if they come out, they have suffered their entire life to the point where they know that when they come out, they're going to lose their families. They're probably going to lose their jobs and probably going to be completely unemployable. They think about suicide. This is all something to understand. You have to have empathy. Now that I'm out as myself, I have clarity. I don't deal with gender dysphoria. I can focus on my job, my task. This is the gift. I now know what it feels like to be whole, just like all of you. And for somebody who's never experienced that before, it's euphoric when you experience it. Trans people, thank you. 0.7% of our population are born transgender all across the planet. We are the most marginalized section of our people there are. People kill us because of who we are. It's a risk for me in Waterville, Maine to go out to dinner because I'm in the paper all the time. People know that I'm transgender. Understand that we're not bad people. We're creative. We want to fit in with society. We are not pedophiles. We're not groomers. We have children. We have grandchildren. And we understand what it feels like to be different. So know if that employee comes out, that they have suffered. And they are going to be a better employee if you just allow them to be themselves and do their life and their work. It must be 5 minutes, isn't it? I'm all set. Thank you. I'll pass it on to the next.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fatuma Hassan. I'm a new Mainer. I came to the state in 2018. It was the first time that I experienced discrimination based on the color of my skin. I'm originally from Djibouti. We had a different type of discrimination back home. It was a discrimination based on the tribe. Came to United States and I found out my skin color has a wrong with it. Nobody ever looked at my qualifications or my education. I speak 5 different languages. English is one of my recent language that I learned, and I had to do it because I went to undergrad and earned my bachelor in English. My native language is French and Arabic. But the question is, nobody ever gave me an opportunity, and I had to change my career before I went back, before I started what I call integrating into my HR. I had experience, I got the education, I was pursuing my master, but nobody ever gave me an opportunity to even invest in me and say, hey, let's try her in HR field. HR is predominantly dominated by white females. So seeing someone from a different color, young, in a leadership role is being quite actually difficult, especially when I'm trying to either change. My HR director, Susanna Glantz over there, me, I love her. Me and her, we sit down sometimes and teach each other the different, I sit down and say, hey, tell me a little bit about your culture. What do you mean when they say something? Okay, can somebody fill me in? Do you guys forget that I'm from a different culture? What do you guys mean in that? So it was a lot, but what I will say is anybody can run spreadsheet regardless of what language they speak. English is just a language, does not define the qualification of the candidate. So whenever you guys reviewing those resume, maybe put an assessment out there. Maybe the someone who is, you guys will not be able to spell their first or last name in the resume will excel in the assessment skills during the interview. So that's what I'm saying is I'm grateful that I got an opportunity to get back to my field that I had originally worked back in Djibouti. And I'm actually quite content with my current job and the current leadership who is highly advocating for the diversity in the DEI, and as well as also investing and creating all different pathways to integrate the immigrant to our community. But what I will say is think outside of the box. If someone at a different resume came up, but someone does have work skills back in their home country, give them an opportunity. You don't even have to, most of the employers in the state of Maine, 80% of them are employee at will. So you will not even lose anything. If that employee did not produce or is not productive, as you guys think, at the end, you guys can terminate them, or it's just terminate their employment with you, their employment with you guys, but give them an opportunity. My HR director and the previous HR director had to redesign my job description 3 times within the span of 4 years because of I was able to take on an additional responsibilities. But I was told I'm a diverse hire. I am a diverse hire, but not in a good way. I know that the person who made that comment did not have the good intention when they say I'm a diverse hire. Absolutely, I'm a diverse hire, but you did not lower the bar for me. You did not lower the bar for me. Did I pass my 5 minutes? Okay, thank you.
I am really not going to pull the plug on anyone. Dr. Biffle?
The reason he's saying that is I'm a professor. And this is our finals week. So those of you that are educators and teachers, I have a truckload of things I have to read when I go back to Waterville. So if I stammer or stutter, well, that's just the way it is. Good morning. Thank you, and I'm glad you know how to greet. That's really critically important. I'm so honored to be part of a panel with 2 extraordinary people. And I think that there's so much to be learned from our experiences and what we do. I offer 2 quotes. I'm a professor. To bring us into certain realities. If you know whence you came, there is really no limit to where you can go. James Baldwin said that. And those of you who have read Baldwin was ahead of his time in so many different ways. The second quote I raise is from our previous speaker because we talked a little bit about similarities rather than differences. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. The great Dr. Maya Angelou. And I'm proud to say that I knew her. So again, it's really quite an honor to be here. And as she used to say, I am surrounded by my ancestors. Every time I speak, I feel their presence. Very quickly, Richard L. Biffle III, really quite important. How many of you are from Maine? Okay, how many of you are not from Maine? Okay, I am not from Maine. I am 4th generation Coloradoan. Good, we got something in common. I know the plantation that my family was brought to back in the 1700s. Why do I know this? I'm a professor of education. I'm a professor of cultural anthropology. I'm also an archaeologist. My latest endeavor the last 5 years has created a program called STEAM at Thomas College, called Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Mathematics. Those of you that are familiar with STEM, what I did is I added art, because I'm also a graphic artist. Name me a researcher, name me a technician, name me a scientist, name me a mathematician who's not an artist. And so that's part of the conversation as well. I started out my life wanting to be an architect. I ran afoul of my father. My father was one of the original Tuskegee Airmen. My father was a fighter pilot in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. I was supposed to go to the United States Air Force Academy. I was nominated, I was accepted, and then I didn't go. My father and I didn't talk basically for 10 years. He was that disappointed because his dream was his dream, but he never asked me what my dream was. I started off as an architect major at a well-known university that's been in the paper of late, UCLA. only to discover that in my first engineering class, somebody sat next to me and looked at me and said, "Why are you here?" I didn't understand the question. When you're 17 years old, there are lots of questions you get asked. But when the professor came around and said, "What makes you think that you can be in this class?" And I didn't have a response. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to react. I had a dream of being an architect. That's what I wanted to be. He said, "How many people who look like you are architects?" At the time, I didn't really even know. Not knowing that in Los Angeles, major kinds of things that were done by Black architects, but they never talked about it. It's hard to go through and traverse life when you're constantly being told you cannot do something. I've enjoyed 45 years of being a teacher. I'm a former elementary teacher, a former middle school teacher. Those of you in middle school, thank you very much. I'm also a former elementary school principal. I share these things with you because oftentimes when somebody who looks like me begins to talk about what they've done in their life, there are lots of curious questions. I didn't get here on a pass. I got here because I was qualified to do the things that I have done. I have worked very, very hard to do what I have done. When I came to Maine, and you'll be interested at one level, I came here from the University of Hawaii. Now, there are those people who ask me, why would you come to Maine from the University of Hawaii? I was director of teacher education programs at the University of Hawaii at Hilo on Big Island. And then I was director of teacher education programs at the University of West Oahu on Oahu. Once again, I earned those positions. People asked me to take over those jobs and responsibilities. I didn't get here on a pass. Once again, when Fatima was talking about what she was talking about, when I was 5 years old, my parents decided to move us to Morocco. My father was a NATO instructor for pilots. My father spoke 4 languages. My mother spoke 4 languages. Imagine what it's like growing up as a child in Casablanca, Morocco. And one of the things that she said that resonated for me, I never experienced any racism, prejudice, discrimination, or anything else. And then when they found out I spoke a little bit of Arabic, they automatically assumed I was Moroccan. We didn't experience any racism, prejudice, discrimination until we came back to this country. And my sister and I still talk about when we used to have problems in schools, we'd talk in Arabic to completely throw people off. But it's one thing to thrive, it's a whole nother thing to try to figure out how you just survive. We have a lot of students in our schools, we have a lot of students in our programs that are just surviving. Don't invite them to the table if you don't want them to eat. I shared in a comment and somebody asked me to bring it up. I've lived in Maine for 12 years. I've lived in Waterville for 12 years. Waterville is a very, very different place. Up until last year, I had never been invited to anyone's home, go out to dinner, socialize, or even have a conversation. Yeah, that's about 11 years of isolation. And I can't tell you as a professional and as somebody who works with students and trying to prepare them for the world, what that's like. So I share my story. I talk story, as we say in Hawaii, with my students. Don't invite people if you're not going to involve them in the process. Don't invite people if you're not going to engage them. Don't invite people if you're not going to take time and talk with them. Don't bother, because all it's going to do is reinforce the issues and the challenges that they have to face every single day. I can tell you numerous stories about walking in downtown Waterville for the first time, and I'll share some of that with you today. What's it like walking down the sidewalk and having people literally walk on the other side of the street when they see you coming? Or people who clutch their purses? Or people when you're standing in line in the grocery store and somebody looks at you and they say, "What are you doing here?" "Well, I work here." "Well, what is it that you do?" "Well, I teach." "Well, what do you teach?" "I'm a professor." "A professor? Someone like you?" "Yes, someone like me." "Well, what's it like teaching at Colby?" "I don't teach at Colby. I teach at Thomas." "Thomas College?" This was an everyday occurrence every time I went into Shaw's in Waterville for the first 5 years I lived here. And then once they found out who I was, then it was like, "Well, how long are you going to be here?" I said, "As long as it takes for that person over there to ring up my goods, put them in a bag, and I'll be out the door." Yes, to a certain degree, you have to have a sense of humor because if you didn't, it would devour you. It would simply take you out. So when we talk about the things that have happened and we talk about ideas, and I share with my students, I've been on every continent in the world except Antarctica, and I'm working on that. I've lived and traveled. I've done a lot of different things that most people would think somebody who looks like me could not do. I do a lot of things. But one of the things that I'm very proud of, and it happened again this week, is I had a student that was very troubled, and she came to me and she said, "Dr. B," because that's what I'm known as, because Biffle, for some strange reason, is hard to pronounce. Who knew? Oh, by the way, it's German. Biffle is beautiful, Bueffel. I'm from Kontvig, Germany. Yes, and every now and then I'll throw a little German into the mix. And then people are completely confused. But she came up to me and she goes, "Dr. B," she said, "I just need to share something with you." And I said, "Okay." And I was immediately thinking, no, you're not going to get an extension on the paper that you haven't handed in. So don't even go there. And she, before I could say it, she said, "I'm not here for a grade change. I'm just here to thank you for something that you've done. You're the first person that's ever given me an opportunity to think. Your stories, your thoughts, your ideas, and other things." Now, that may sound somewhat braggadocious, but believe me, as a teacher and as an educator, I think teachers and educators need to talk more about what they do. Hold your head high. You know, don't get into the thing. When I first came into the business, somebody said, "What do you do?" "I'm a teacher." I often think back to automobile decal that I saw once upon a time that said, "If you can read this, thank a teacher." So again, very honored to be here this morning to share, and as we say in Hawaii, talk story. So thank you all very much for coming, and hopefully this will be a wonderful and an engaging opportunity.
Let's thank all of our panelists one more time for those introductions. Okay, so my first question for you, and I think you're going to take them in the same order that we did the introductions, is to share with the audience a success story from your current work. So something that you've accomplished that you're proud of. So, Ella.
You can hear this mic. Back in 2021, I believe, I assembled a group of people and we developed an organization called Kennebec Regional Diversity Initiative. And the purpose of that in Central Maine was to bring our municipal government on board with, at the very bottom end of it, a resolution supporting diversity in our region. our region is, the workforce is down about 20%. And part of the reason for that is because of retiring seniors like myself. And we know that diversity is marching in this direction. So we wanted to capture as much diversity as we could in our region. We managed to get the town of Oakland, the city of Waterville, Winslow, and Fairfield to all sign on to this resolution. This was a huge win for us because we were able to have open discussions and council meetings. These towns are made up of everybody. And so we continue to push that. We continue to march that diversity resolution through other towns. And unfortunately, the further north we got, the less success we had. But that was a huge win for us. Since then, we've lost a couple of our facilitators, and this project has kind of come to a pause. And the goal is to re-energize it and continue to push in that direction.
I'm thinking of a particular success story. So of course, my background and helped me navigate certain cases, especially when the department is investigating and there is a hearing. Having someone from a diverse background can easily analyze and understand the root. So if there is what I call employee conflict between two employees, one of them from a different backgrounds, new Mainer, and happened that that person eitherly speak with their hands. So it's a culture thing. Someone who grew up in Maine might not understand that and can immediately take it as an aggressive way. So it's facilitating those conversations and enabling understand that this employee that, hey, maybe this is a culture thing. Have you ever thought of understanding maybe this is the way that they talk? So that is one of success story. The other thing is also we start increasing the substitute pool. So the Lewiston Public Schools have one of the largest substitute teachers pool in the district. And what happened was a lot of nonprofit organizations start referring their customers to us or their clients to us and say, go to the HR, ask for Fatuma. She will tell you what to do. So what we did was I have someone just randomly show up at the front office asking, I was told to speak with Fatuma. Well, Fatuma is the assistant HR director of this department. How can I help you? Is the HR support person asking. Then you will see, oh, I was told to speak with Fatuma. So when I have a conversation, what I was directed to you, it's just the ability of having connection. Is someone just randomly showing up at your office, at your department, can connect with you. And it's just explain to them what is the process, what is your qualifications. And we start highly start recruiting from adult ed, directly recruiting from adult ed to the Lewiston Public Schools. So I think I have a lot. I cannot put a specific success story because I can name millions of success story. But what I've seen is have me being in the HR department help the department to attract more of these skills or these new Mainers or the new Mainers coming in, connecting and seeing someone who look like them work in HR. So that's what I feel like is the major success story.
When we talk about DEI, one of the things that we have to consider is what does it mean? I mean, what does it mean really? And recently I've discovered 6 words: communication, collaboration, creative problem solving, commitment, courage, and cultural competence. Now, I'm sure you could add more words, but those words have been guiding principles in terms of what I've done. In my career, I've also been a civil rights worker. My first job out of undergrad was I was on the national staff of the NAACP. That was pretty impressive at the time because I was living in Berkeley, California, which I thought was the center of the earth, and moved to New York City and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I was in charge of NAACP programs along the Eastern Seaboard. I often say it was the greatest postgraduate education I ever had. I worked with people that were just legendary in terms of civil rights. And as a former student leader, one person looked at me and said, "You're never a former anything, you're always a leader." But when we start talking about a success of recent memory, I really have to talk about what we did at Thomas College in 2021, 2022. The murder of George Floyd challenged this country in many different ways. How it challenged many people, though, it was captured on film. It was captured on video. And those of us that are old enough to remember the Vietnam War, where every night we would watch the Vietnam War and body bags and other things. These images really created a lot of change in this country in terms of dialogue and discussion, and that's just one. But George Floyd's was somewhat different. African Americans had been basically murdered all across this country. But that one triggered something that was different because you actually, unfortunately, tragically watched somebody being murdered. It wasn't a script, but then some people think it was a script. So I remember that night I was talking to some people back home in California and Colorado, and they were saying, "Well, you live in Maine. What's it like living in Maine? Are people talking about these things in Maine?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." Understand, I have friends back in the West that think Maine is still part of Eastern Canada. They know nothing about Maine. And when I began to talk about a few things, I said, well, one of the things that I'm going to do is write a letter to the community of Thomas College and talk about the tragic death and what we as a community need to do to step up to do something. Now, that was a stretch for me. I am the first and only African American professor in the history of Thomas College. That's 130 years. I'm still there. But we needed to do something, and we needed to do something in a dramatic way. So what myself and a colleague, Professor Judy Hanson Childers, decided to do was create originally what was called the President's Council on Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice. And I took a model that came back to me from my civil rights days and then also my background as an administrator. And to create an inclusive task force, you have to think, there is no box. You have to create something that's very different. A high percentage of staff, faculty, students at Thomas, not familiar necessarily with the stories. What do you do? How do you address diversity, equity, and inclusion? We can do it in the curriculum. We can do it perhaps in terms of activities and events. But again, what's a way that you bring the community together? So our task force is made up of 41 people. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, 41 people. Strategically identified people. We have administrators, we have 3 board of trustees. That one blew me away. 3 board of trustees members came to me and said, we want to do something. If you don't invite them, sometimes they don't come. They came. We had originally 9 faculty members. Those of you that are administrators of schools and other things realize that faculty are all over the map sometimes in who they are and what they talk about and what they want to do. But we identified 9 faculty. Critically important to that addition was the representation of students, because if you're not inviting students to the table, what's the point? If we're about the business of leadership, if we're about the business of cultivating that next generation of voices to do something about something, you have to invite student leaders. But we took a different tact. We didn't just go in terms of student government. We didn't go to the athletes. We didn't go anyplace else. We went to the entire student body. And we identified people that really wanted to work and really wanted to show up. And that was really quite extraordinary. Then staff. Once again, if you don't invite staff, then you're not being inclusive. And staff just began to show up. People just began to show up at my office door. I want to do something. Can I be part of the council? And we said yes. They brought their expertise, their wisdom. But most of what the staff brought sometimes is the question about why oftentimes aren't they included in the discussions and conversations that impact the college? And then last, of course, the alums. Because again, you have to talk to alums, and we were looking at alums of color, alums that were from Maine, outside of Maine. What has the experience at this particular college prepared for you to do in your variety of career paths? It's 2024. We still basically have the council that's undergone a lot of iterations. It's undergone a lot of challenge. It's undergone a lot of different things that have worked. It's undergone something that I call failure as a gift. And if you don't understand that, you need to understand something about that in this business. You are not going to be successful every time you do something. And you just need to get that out there so that you understand, evaluate, assess, and figure out what you need to do next. And that's what we're doing. We're still in existence. We're down to 38, but it's only because we haven't had time to go back and recruit 5 other people to come forward and be part of the council. But I'm very proud of that a very small college in Central Maine, with most people who have never heard of, stepped forth and did something at a time when, and I will say arguably that no other college and university in Maine was doing anything. People were talking about it, but you know what came up more often than not? What is the political capital getting involved in this discussion? So we have to deal with the F word, and the F word is fear. You got to get that out of your minds. But you've got to do something that's really quite extraordinary. And I couldn't be more proud of being something that is almost legacy now, because now it's just people want to be on it because they just want to be on it because of who we are and what we do.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing those success stories. And for the next question, I'm going to flip that and ask you to share with us one of the vexing challenges that you have faced and maybe continue to face in your work of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you. I was just telling Dr. Biffle, this is the 3rd time that the two of us have presented together, and every time I present with him, I learn something new. Thank you, Dr. Biffle. The biggest issue that obviously I deal with is transgender. This is a time of political divide. There's movement across the country to actually make us all go away. There's states that have adopted many, many laws that make our lives very, very tough. And that's marching up here to the state of Maine as well. This is so tough when you come out. I actually lost a job. I worked in the town of Oakland for 24 years, and it's very difficult for people to accept the fact when you're working as Gary and you transition to Ella. I'll never forget the day that I was sitting in a department head meeting. I called a special meeting because I was going to be coming into work the next day as myself. And I had my police chief, my fire chief, my public works director, my transfer station manager, all the cogs in my wheel sitting there. And I explained to them that I'm transgender And I have been this way my entire life. And I'm going to come to work tomorrow as myself. You could have a pin drop. That rattles people to the core. I am speaking from example for life experience from this. This is still a problem today. Yesterday, I had one of my superiors come into my office and said, I understand you're going to be doing the presentation at Inclusion Maine. He goes, I would really appreciate it if you didn't connect the town of Winslow to your presentation. So this will never change for us. I am almost to the point, and I was telling Peter this just the other day at a training, and I'm almost at a point that I'm really wondering if it's even possible for a transgender person to do public service, especially in the position of a town or city manager, because of the divide that's out there. This will always be an issue. Trans people have been here since the beginning of mankind, and we're going to be here until the end of mankind. It's a birth difference. That's all there is to it. So as long as I'm in the public eye, as long as I'm a community leader and a leader in municipal work, it's always going to be tough on me. I'm always going to have somebody that's going to come up to me and tell me, I don't agree with your lifestyle. It's not a lifestyle. This is who I am. So that's my biggest vexing issue and my biggest problem. But I'm going to hang in there until they end up canceling me. So.
But for me, the biggest vaccine challenge is more of mentally, is internally versus external. So at the beginning of my employments, I had a lot of people questioning. Well, let me go ahead and, even though that I'm handling it to the textbook, the way the policy says, the way everything, they just want another person saying it. So every single morning I go to work knowing that that was the first challenge I faced, even though that the situations or the environment is completely different, but it's still within me that I need to prove myself. So it's just the continuous proving yourself, continuing putting yourself and say, watch me in action, watch me cook, watch me make that decision. So it's just more internally versus external. And I hope one day at some point that I will overcome that. But I'm in a better place where I was a couple of years ago. That's a good thing, at least.
I think to piggyback upon what she said is critically important. If you don't know what it's like to have to prove yourself every single day, then you don't understand basically what this is all about. Issues come up, challenges come up, things come up, and all of a sudden, you're the mantle of expert. I remember one time, just as a pushback, I said, I'm one of 13 million Black people in this country. I don't speak for all Black people. And it's unfair for you to identify people, particularly people of color sometimes, as the experts. A couple of the first people I met when I came to Waterville were freedom riders that came out of Maine that went down south during the 60s. And I was really struck by their story, but they had never told their story because they had never been invited to tell their story. So I share with you another quote. I'm full of quotes today. Ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is not the struggle of one judicial appointment or presidential term. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, or maybe even many lifetimes, and each one of us in every generation must do our part. The great John Lewis, who passed away, is the one who said that. And I think we have to understand that those kinds of things have to happen. But we have to move beyond the whole notion and idea of just one person, one voice. We have to move to the notion and idea of many people and many voices. That's a sense of community. That's in a sense of inclusiveness. And yes, you have to step out there sometimes, and you're not going to be popular, but you don't get in this business to be popular, believe me. I still have friends that are going, "You're still doing all that stuff? Why?" I said, "Because you're not." Straight up.
Amazing. So this is our last formal question, and then we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. But based on your work and knowing that everybody that's in this room is also doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work at some level, what's the most important thing that you would like our participants to take away from this session that's based on your life and your work experience? What's the most important thing?
Every one of you in this room are in the people business. We need to understand that people come in different shapes and sizes. People come in different colors. They come with different backgrounds, different religious beliefs, different politics. They come with different sexual orientations, and they come with different gender identities. We have to understand we're all people, and we need everybody in that group to win. Please know that.
How many of you are employers? How many of you is hiring managers? All you need is someone who do the job, regardless of their background. Or if you unable or incapable of, not even able to pronounce their name. So what I will do is go beyond your comfort zone and just put it out there. Like if you feel like maybe you don't want to take a risk of hiring a new Mainer or someone with a diverse background, put an assessment, put a test, and see how that person excel. Then at that time, you will make your decision based on the skills and the qualification. And as I said it before, anybody can run a spreadsheet regardless of their native language. So English is just the language, does not define the skills or qualification.
The educator and teacher always comes out. And sometimes that's my frame of reference for doing things. I value the fact that being a teacher is an honorable position. But also being a teacher is honorable in terms of listening to my students. And that's critically important as well. Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world. You might be surprised who said that. Harriet Tubman. It brings to mind that we have a lot of things that we have to do, but we have to create a generation that understands who we are, where we've been, where we are, and where we want to go. History is not always pleasant, but you have to address it and you have to face it in terms of those kinds of things. You have to become well-read, but in addition to being well-read, you have to listen to others who are also well-read. Democracy is still a work in progress, and it always has been. Is it any more challenging now than it's ever been? Well, it depends on who the speaker is, I suppose. But I'm concerned with certain things that are happening. I'm concerned about certain ideas that are being expressed. I'm concerned about the notion and idea of how somebody can determine what books will be read and what books will not be read. what institutions will be addressing certain issues and what institutions should not address anything. But I hearken back to something also that's critically important. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. You don't do this business because you want to be rich and famous. You do this because you want to be engaged, you have a passion, and you want to help. And it is not easy. There's nothing easy about it. It separates families, it separates relationships, it separates people. It doesn't have to, but we have to deal with the notion of fear. Living in Central Maine does not present any more challenges, more or less, than things I faced when I lived in Colorado or when I lived in California. Or dare I say, when I lived in Hawaii. Because I worked with Polynesian people, and if you want to talk about marginalized people, go back and read their history. Go back and read what happened to them. Another group of people we don't talk about is indigenous people on the mainland. Maine has its own struggles with some of that as well. Face it, deal with it, be honest with it, and do something about it. Otherwise, you just simply perpetuate the whole situation.
Important, surprised that it actually worked. Important words to end our responses to the questions. It's short-lived. It has a short fuse. I don't know how we're going to do the Q&A. We actually need one of the mics, Peter. So we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. So see if this one works. Anybody have a question? Questions from the audience? You have a question in the back there?
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is William Safari. I'm a new Mainer since 2022. I'm blind. I've faced a lot of challenges because back where I'm from in Rwanda, from 2015, even before, I was advocating for people with disabilities to get involved, to get included in different services in Rwanda. And I guess it's also the same job that I'm currently doing. So one of the challenges that I know for people who do advocate, it's persistence to change, for whom we need to change. So my question is this: what are the main tips to deal with those people, to deal with persistence to change, for whom we need to change? My second question, before yesterday, tonight, I read an inclusion article in a university, especially in Florida, where different departments like gender, Black departments in the universities are about being closed. So I want to ask you, what is the rate of uh, the rate of closing or the rate of how is this situation is in brief. I want to know the situation of inclusion in universities or in education in general, because I heard it's not easy. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I did not catch the first question, the second. You did?
So I would like to answer his first question, resistant to change. As a someone who wrote about it in my undergrad degree, resistant to change, or the people who's resisting to change, there is a multiple factors or root cause for the resistant change. One of them was the longevity or how this person was in that system is the and it this way. So it's more of comfort. So you're challenging their comfort. So what I will say is try to break down the change into smaller steps. And you will find them in the middle of the change process that they moved out of their position without them knowing they did. So that was the first question, but I did not cut the second.
Yeah, so the second question was about the current trend of closing out diversity, diversity offices and diversity work in organizations. And so I wonder, Ella, you shared the resolution and how that has sort of faded out in some communities. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. And then I'm also curious, Professor Biffle, around the ability to sustain in your institution, over these 4 years since the George Floyd murder, and how you've been able to keep that interest going. So maybe Ella first, and then Professor Biffle.
So we've certainly made a strong attempt to bring diversity into our region, and we had the support of 4 communities. But unfortunately, this takes so much work. It takes constant, persistent work to make this happen. And as people moved on, we lost the energy, and it needs to be brought back. This is something that we're all busy. It's hard to make it all happen, and it's hard to find the right people to sit on these committees to actually participate and build a product.
I think in answering the first part of the question, it's the whole thing of sustainability. And sustainability really has a lot to do with intentionality. Why we've been able to do things? Because we've been intentional about continuing to do things. We haven't tried to necessarily quantify it, although we have a litany of data metrics that support the fact that the direction that we're going is the right direction we're going. But it also has to do with change. And change is something that happens. When you do this work, the work that you did last week, the strategies that you had last week may not work this week. And I'm not going to throw rocks at social media and other kinds of things, but that is a real challenge. And we have to wrap our heads around how do we address those kinds of issues. I think the second part of the brother's question, which I think is even more challenging, is the whole thing of systemic and endemic kinds of things that are happening in this country. Our institutions, particularly education institutions, are under attack. It's not just higher ed, ladies and gentlemen. It's secondary teachers, it's middle school teachers, it's elementary teachers, it's preschool teachers are under attack. Why are you teaching my child that kind of thing? Why are you engaging my child in these kinds of conversations? Why are you having my child read these particular books? Well, part of the challenge sometimes is articulating a point of view and not defending a point of view. And that's tricky. Why, as a classroom teacher, do I use certain materials? Because I want to engage my students in an opportunity to not only have knowledge, but lifelong learning in terms of how to do things, and change is part of that. But there are people that are fearful of that. It's curious in terms of how higher ed is being attacked. I'm astonished that DEI positions have been eliminated in the last 6 months in incredible rates across the country, principally involving state-funded colleges and universities. And now we have to know something about finance, economics, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, you have to do your homework. You have to do your homework. You have to find out where it's coming from, why is it coming from, and you have to come back with an articulate point of view and not a defensive point of view. If I haven't learned anything in education and teaching, I've learned that it's critically important to articulate your position and not defend it. Where did I learn that? When I was working on my PhD. Another story for another time.
Other questions?
Hi, my name is Layla. Firstly, I want to say thank you so much for you guys for sharing your experiences. So this question I jotted down. It speaks about the idea of building connections in diverse communities. So as leaders with diverse backgrounds like yourselves and identities, how do you navigate the intersectionality of your own experiences while building connections in communities that may share some but not all aspects of your identities?
Hello? His legs are a mess. Kind of like me. It's all about communication. It's talking with people, talking with different diversities to try to understand what's going on. If I don't have your lived experience, it's impossible for me to understand what your life is. So I want to hear it. I want to hear what your life has been. We cross each other's path. There's so much diversity in this room. There's so much interest in diversity in this room. My recommendation is to talk to somebody who's diverse. Ask them what it's like. Ask them what it's like to live in central Maine, like Dr. Biffle has been sharing. This is so important for us. The bottom line is we are all skin, bones, and blood, every one of us. We all have feelings. We all have a life. We have families. We need to understand that we're people. So it's all about communication.
I think the other thing, and it was expressed a few minutes ago, is you have to start small and build upon that. Scaffold the experiences. It might be a small school. It might be a small community. It might be a small religious group. But whatever, small business, it doesn't matter. That's where it starts. Conversation, dialogue, other kinds of things. That's how you get informed. And you're not just making, decisions based upon knee-jerk reactions to situations. But it's hard work because the hardest work of all that is sustainability. Everything starts off initially with great promise, but you've got to develop and cultivate leadership within those groups to sustain the conversations, the dialogues, et cetera, et cetera. And that's hard to do. Sometimes it's the whole problem of life is what happens while you're making plans. You have well-intended ideas to want to do things, but things happen. Suddenly you don't have the time. One of the things that you have to learn how to do sometimes is say no. And not in a nasty, kind of way, but just, I don't have the time, honestly, at this particular point in time, and you begin to do it. But if children and young people are our most valuable asset, I can assure you we need to start taking more time with them. Because there are many people out there that would enjoy taking time with him to have other agendas and other ideas. But it takes time to do those kinds of things. As somebody said, well, Dr. B, you're an elder now. And dare I say, yeah, damn right I'm an elder. I've earned the right to be an elder. I've paid dues. What I'm trying to do is share with you life journeys and ways that you can do things that I should have done or not make the same mistakes that I made. Speak from a voice of authenticity and genuineness. I don't know a young person that wouldn't be terribly involved in terms of listening to you if you're genuine and you're authentic and you really want to take the time. But as is the case, we've got to be intentional about what we do. We've got to break down these barriers. And most of them, candidly, are artificial. They're removable. But you have to be intentional about how you move them down, how you move them out. Another thing I would challenge this group in this particular conference, next time invite a group of students. Have them come. Have them experience the wonder of what we're doing in dialogue, conversation, etc. Have a student panel up here. Listen to them. And then you can begin to frame out some of the things that you might want to do and how you want to do them.
One more audience question. Aisha's hand is up.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Aisha Hall, and this might be a good question to end on. As a leader in your diverse bodies, minds, hearts, and spirits, you have colleagues who would like to be good allies to you. Me recently, I was blessed to be a part of someone's transgender journey, and it has been hard and it's been long and it's draining, not just to the person, but the person that's supporting. So, and I also am worried or concerned that I'm not sure how, I know how to be a Black lady, so I know how to encourage and support Black ladies. That's what I do. But there are so many other ways that diverse, we express ourselves and the experiences that we have. And I sometimes feel like I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want to assume I know how to support the leaders that I'm connected to right now, who are sharing a similar experience, but also have different aspects of their identities that are hard to carry. So my question is, is there any advice or encouragement or words of inspiration you can give to those people who stand alongside you as leaders in the positions that you're in?
The biggest advice I can give anybody is to believe us. 1.6 million people who are out transgender across this nation are not collectively lying to you when we tell you that our brains and bodies don't match up. Just believe us. The only thing, that would change the world for us. 60% of the population feel that I'm a hero. 40% of the population thinks that I'm mentally ill. And that's so hard for me to accept because I don't think I am mentally ill. Thank you for asking that.
I think another thing you can do, and this gets back to intentionality, is sitting down with those people and finding time to break bread, finding time to engage in conversation, finding time to get into a readers group, finding time to take them someplace they haven't been, finding time. And sometimes it doesn't involve a lot of money. You know, people push back on me sometimes because they're always saying, well, Dr. B, everything you talk about has a cost. I say, sometimes the cost is just showing up. That's the cost. It doesn't matter if it's Burger King or someplace else. But it's just trying to find that time. I work with professors, by and large, that will have a different conversation with me in a hallway than they will at a faculty meeting. because they're afraid. And I said, what do you got to be afraid of? You have a PhD just like I have a PhD. What's the fear? Oh, I get it. You want to be accepted. Well, another thing that you have to understand about this business, it's more important to be respected than it is to be liked. Straight up. But I think that's how you support your colleagues. It's about deeds, it's not about words.
So I think we're gonna end. Gonna- It's me, it's not the microphone. So I get that, Peter. It is me, it's not the microphone. So let's end on that note. Let's thank our panelists one more time. Certainly, from my perspective, this is I actually don't know how different. This is exactly what we wanted from this session, was to understand how in very different contexts, in very different settings, diverse people experience their successes and failures in the same way. So those contexts are different. The realities that they deal with are different, but those experiences are shared by everyone up here and are shared by everyone that is out here today. So I think take from this that the challenges that you're experiencing are not unique, and that it's through those partnerships, through the understanding, the intentionality, the commitment to continuing that work is how you both continue to build on those successes and overcome the challenges that vex you. I think that this is an amazing group of people that have shared with us their experience, their life experience and their work experience. And I know I'm better for it. And I hope that everyone here feels the same way. So again, thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your time.